The auctioneer said she was worthless. Nobody argued. She stood on the platform in chains, her head down, and the crowd moved on the way crowds do when there is nothing worth stopping for. The price dropped until it was almost nothing. The rancher stood at the edge with a coin in his hand. He paid. No one understood why. He was not sure he did either. But that was the day everything changed. 3 weeks before that, he had stood at the fence line in the early morning and looked at his land. The fence was broken in 4 places. The roof of the barn sagged on the left side, where the rain had been getting in since March. The fields were dry and unturned. The seeds his wife had bought the spring before she died sat in a cloth sack in the corner of the kitchen, tied with a piece of string she had cut herself. They had been sitting there for 14 months. He had not planted them. He had not done a great many things. 3 fence posts on the east line had rotted through and needed pulling. He knew where the new ones were stacked. He had thought about it more than once. The wood on the south side of the porch had been splitting since winter, and he walked over it every morning without stopping to look. The seeds waited in their sack. The posts waited in the barn. Everything waited. The house was clean because he cleaned it. The horses were fed because the horses needed feeding. He replaced the well rope in February when the old one snapped because there was no other choice. Everything he did because it could not go undone. Everything else waited. He moved around the kitchen the way you move around something that hurts. Not carefully, just around it. The chair on the left side of the table was where she had sat every morning with her coffee, and he had not moved it, and he did not sit in it, and he did not think about why, because not thinking about it was easier than the other thing. Her name had been Clara. She had died in October. It was now June. Not grief, not exactly, just the fact of it, sitting there the same way the seeds sat in the corner. The ranch had been theirs. Now it was his, which was a different thing, and the land seemed to understand that, even if he was still working it out. The fences leaned. The fields sat empty. The barn roof gave a little more each month. Patient as everything broken is patient, waiting for someone to notice. He fed the horses. He cleaned the house. He did not fix the fences. On a Tuesday morning, he hitched the wagon and drove the 12 miles into town for flour, salt, and a new length of rope for the back gate. He had the list in his pocket. He knew what he needed and where to get it, and he planned to be home before dark. He was not going to the auction. He did not know there was one until he turned the corner past the mill and heard the noise of it, voices and movement, and that particular sound a crowd makes when it is deciding something. He stopped the wagon. He sat for a moment. Then he climbed down and walked toward it, not because he had a reason, but because his feet carried him, and he had stopped arguing with that sort of thing some time ago. He stood at the edge and watched. He finished at the supply store before the sun had moved much past the ridge line. Flour and salt and the new rope, same as the list, and he had the wagon loaded and the canvas tied before the street was properly busy. The morning was cool and still. He stood at the wagon a moment and looked at the town. It was a small place. One main road, a mill at the far end, a blacksmith shop on the corner near the market square. He had not spent much time here since October, since he had brought Clara in for the last time and driven home alone afterward. He came for what he needed and left. That was when he heard it. Not the words first, just the shape of a crowd making up its mind, the low roll of it, the way sound gathers before anything is decided. He had heard that sound before and did not like it. He tied the wagon to the post and walked toward it. The market square was at the far end of the road past the feed lot, an open stretch of packed dirt where the weekly sales were held, stalls along the edges, a smell of hay and horses, and something burnt from the direction of the blacksmith. Maybe 30 people in the square when he got there, more coming in from the side streets. The auctioneer stood on a raised wooden platform with a ledger, and the morning sun was already hard enough that the men in the crowd had their hats pulled low. Then the rancher saw her. She stood at the far end of the platform, tall, far taller than anyone near her, taller than anyone he had seen, broad at the shoulders. The chains on her wrists were the iron kind, heavy, with a length of link that would have let her move if she had chosen to move. She had not chosen. The skin around her wrists was dark where the iron had been. Her head was down, not bowed, not the way a person bows who is trying to make themselves smaller. Just down, the way a head goes when standing, has been going on for too long. She was thin where she should not have been thin. The kind of thin that does not happen in a week. Her hands were loose at her sides. Her feet were flat on the boards. The crowd moved around her the way water moves around a stone it has already decided about. The auctioneer went through his notes. Age unclear. Condition poor. He said difficult twice, and a man standing near the rancher made a small sound and moved away. The price started low and went lower. The auctioneer did not seem surprised. No one bid. He let the silence sit, then said she was worthless. Just that word. Worthless. Like a category, not a judgment. She did not move when he said it, did not lift her head, did not shift her weight. The word landed and she let it. The crowd was mostly gone now, a few men still near the front, talking to each other, not looking at the platform. 3 men stood off to one side near the seller's post, their backs to the square, speaking low. One of them had been there since before the price started dropping. The auctioneer turned a page in his ledger. The sun moved. The morning went on. The rancher stood at the edge of the square and did not look away. The auctioneer had almost moved on when the rancher raised his hand. No one said anything for a moment. The auctioneer looked at him, the way you look at something you were not expecting to see and had not arranged a response for. "You're bidding?" the auctioneer said. It wasn't quite a question. "I'm bidding," the rancher said. The auctioneer named the price. It was almost nothing. The rancher nodded. The auctioneer wrote it down. That was it. The 3 men from the seller's post came over. They were not in a hurry. 2 of them were broad-built and younger, and the third was older, with his arms folded, and he had been standing that way since before the price stopped dropping. The rancher counted the money from his front pocket, exact change, and set it on the ledger board. The older man picked it up without looking at him. The other 2 looked at each other. Nobody spoke. The rancher took that as the transaction done. He turned to her. She was watching him. Not the auctioneer. Not the few men still left in the square. Him. Her head was still tilted down, but her eyes were not. And they were dark and level and did not move from his face, and he could not read them. He did not try. She was not afraid. Whatever was behind those eyes, it was not that. He looked at the chains. He did not have the tool for them. He had a knife on his belt, but the iron links were too heavy for a blade, and he was not going to stand in the middle of the square, prying at ironwork, while the remaining crowd formed opinions. He noted where the lock was. He would deal with it at the ranch. He nodded toward the road. She did not move. A few of the men still in the square turned to look. The auctioneer stopped writing. He waited. Then she moved. 1 step, then another, careful on the platform edge, and she came down the 3 steps to the ground and straightened up to her full height. She put her weight on her left foot first, testing the ground, then shifted to stand square. He had seen her from across the square. Up close, she was larger than that first impression, which was already larger than he had expected. She looked at the road. Then she looked at him. She said nothing. He said nothing either. Behind them, a man at the edge of the square made a short sound and said something to the man beside him. The rancher heard it and didn't turn around. Another voice said something about wasting good coin. The rancher kept walking. He reached the wagon and untied the horse. She had followed without being told to keep following, which was something. "My ranch is east of here," he said. "About 12 miles. She said nothing. "There's room," he said. She looked at the wagon bed. Then she climbed in, the chains dragging and catching on the side boards, and she settled herself and looked at the road ahead and not at him. Not trust. Not anything with a name yet. Just two people making the same calculation about what came next. He got up on the seat and took the reins. Behind them, back in the square, the older seller unfolded his arms. He said something low to the two younger men, and they listened without answering. Then all three of them watched the wagon go down the main road until it turned at the mill and was gone. The older man looked at the road for a moment after that. Then he looked at the other two. None of them went back to their business right away. They drove east and the town fell behind them, and the road narrowed to 2 ruts in the dirt, and the land opened up on both sides, flat and dry and brown at the edges, the sky pulling wide overhead the way it does out here, where there is nothing to interrupt it. He did not speak. She did not speak. The horses moved at a steady walk, and the wagon creaked, and the miles went by. He had driven this road since before the land was properly his, back when he and Clara would come in twice a month and go home arguing pleasantly about nothing in particular, and go to bed with the windows open. He did not think about that now. He drove. An hour out from town, on a stretch where the road bent south and the ruts deepened, he noticed her grip on the sideboard change. She was holding tighter than she had been, her knuckles working against the wood, and her posture had dropped a little, the weight not sitting right. The chains were heavy, and the wagon bed was hard, and she had been in worse condition than she looked. He eased the horses down. No comment. Just slowed. She noticed. He saw her notice it, the slight adjustment in how she held herself, something attending to the change. She did not say anything. Neither did he. They went on at the slower pace. Some time after that, she turned and looked at the road behind them. Not at him. Not at the land. At the road itself. Back toward town. He caught it in the corner of his attention and let it sit there. She held that position for a long stretch, watching, and then she turned forward again and did not look back. He did not ask what she had been looking for. He had a reasonable guess, and it was not his to name. The ranch came into view from a low rise on the east road, the way it always did, the barn roof first, then the house, then the fence line running across the flat. Everything was the same as he had left it that morning. The broken section on the south fence, the sag in the barn's left side, the empty fields. She looked at it without expression. He pulled up to the gate and got down and tied the horse and came around to the back. She had already climbed out on her own, managing the chain, and was standing in the dirt looking at the property the way people look at things they are still deciding about. "That's the house," he said. He pointed. "Room off the back." She looked where he pointed. He showed her the room. A cot, a window, a hook on the wall. He put a lamp on the floor and left her with it, and went to see to the horses. That evening, after the horses were fed and the wagon unloaded, he went to the barn and found the bolt cutters on the second shelf behind the rope coils, where he had left them years ago. He had not needed them since. He brought them around to the back of the house. She was standing outside the room, looking at the dark. He crouched down and worked the chain at the wrist lock without explaining what he was doing. The bolt cutters were stiff from disuse, and it took longer than it should have. The chain came free. He moved to the other wrist. When both were off, he set them on the ground and stood up and walked back toward the barn without looking at her. She stood where she was for a long time. On the second morning, he came out before the sun was fully over the ridge and found her already at the fence line. Not working, just standing there, looking at the broken section, the posts that had worked loose from the ground over winter, the rails lying flat in the dirt, the gap where the south pasture opened onto nothing. She was looking at it the way you look at something you are forming an opinion about. Not yet decided, just taking its measure. He went to feed the horses. When he came back, she was in the same place. He did not say anything. He went inside and started the stove. On the third day, he put food on the step before he made his own breakfast, a bowl of something hot and a piece of bread beside it. He set it down and went inside without looking back. When he came out again, the bowl was empty and sitting at the top of the step. She had not brought it inside. She had not taken it away. She had left it where it could be found. He picked it up and went in. He did not know what she was registering, watching him move through his mornings. He only knew what he did. He set the food, and he did not stand at the window, and he came back for the bowl. That was the whole of it. But he was starting to understand that with her, what he did not do was as visible as what he did. On the fourth morning she spoke. She had been near the fence again, and he had come past with the gate tools, and she turned to face him and said, "My child, where was my child when they took me?" Not a question, a statement of what she needed to know and did not. He stopped. He looked at her. He said, "I don't know." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the fence. He stood there with the tools in his hand and the morning around them, and did not say anything else. There was nothing he could say that would be the right thing. He knew that. He also knew the distance between knowing it and it being any comfort at all. He set the gate latch and went on. That afternoon she started pulling the loose fence posts from the ground. Not asking. Not explaining. She took hold of the first one, worked it free, judged the wood, and set it aside. The base was half rotted where the rain had been getting in. She went down the line that way, testing each post, finding the solid part, deciding. The ones that couldn't be saved, she laid flat. The work was slow and careful, and she did not push past what her body would give. He watched from the barn doorway for a moment. Then he picked up the post driver and went around to the other end of the fence line. They worked until the light went low and flat, and the air cooled. He drove posts into the ground. She hauled the bad wood to the burn pile, and came back and tamped the dirt at the base of each new post without being told that was the next step. At some point the work stopped needing explanation. He did one thing, and she was already at the next. Not friendship, not anything with a name. Just two people working the same problem from different ends. When it was too dark to see clearly, he went inside. She did not follow. He left the lamp burning on the step. On the fifth day, he came back from town with the child. He had not said he was going. He had ridden out before the sun was properly up and come back by midday, with the child sitting in front of him on the horse, small and quiet, watching the land ahead. She was at the fence when he came through the gate. She went still when she saw who was behind him on the horse. Then she crossed the yard without hurrying and lifted the child down and put her hand on the child's head and said something low in a language he did not know. The child said something back. Not much. Just a word or two. She kept her hand where it was for a long moment. Then she straightened up and looked at him across the horse's back. He did not look away. He also did not say anything. He unsaddled the horse and led it to the barn. On the 6th day, she climbed onto the roof. The east side of the barn had been leaking since March. The shingles over the gap had rotted through in 2 places, and the light came in at an angle in the afternoon, and he had looked at it many times and not done anything about it. She had looked at it for 2 days. That morning, she found the ladder in the barn, carried it out, and went up without asking. He was splitting wood near the gate when he heard her moving around up there. He split for a while longer. Then he filled a jug from the well and climbed up after her. She was pressing new shingles over the gap, flat and tight, judging the seams. Her hands were more certain than they had been a week ago. Not fully recovered, but something coming back into the way she worked. Something that had not been there on the first day. He set the jug down beside her without comment. She did not thank him. She took it and drank and set it down and went back to the shingles. He went back down. On the roof above him, she kept at it until the light changed. That evening the child sat on the porch step and told them about a horse. The horse had strong opinions about where it would and wouldn't go, and the story circled back through the same argument several times, and partway through a second horse appeared with different opinions, and those also did not resolve, and the child seemed to feel this was the right outcome. The rancher was on the porch cleaning the bridle. He listened without correcting anything. The horses in the story did not behave like horses he knew, but the child was not wrong in the way that children are sometimes wrong, just telling it the way they saw it. He looked up once. The orc mother was in the doorway with one shoulder against the frame, watching the child. She had gone still in a way that was different from her usual stillness. Not watchful, not measuring anything, just still. She did not name whatever it was. He did not ask. Inside, later, he was moving things off the shelf to get at the lamp oil, and the cloth bag came forward with everything else, the one Clara had tied with her own piece of string the spring before she died. He set it on the table to move it aside. The orc mother was in the doorway behind him. He heard her there, but did not explain the bag. He put the bag back where it had been. He did not know what she made of any of it. He was not sure what he made of it himself. What he knew was this. A week ago, the bowl had sat on the step, and he had not known if she would take it. Now there was a child asleep on the cot, and the roof was patched, and the fence held, and the place felt different than it had when he had driven home from town, alone in October. Something in how it sat. Not trust, not anything with a word for it yet. But not what it had been on the first morning either. That evening, neither of them planned to be at the fire at the same time. He had come out after dark to bank it for the night. She was already there, sitting on the far side with her knees drawn up, looking at the flames. He sat down on his side. The child was asleep inside. He could hear the night. Nothing else. They sat for a long time without speaking. The fire did what fires do, and neither of them needed it to be anything else. She spoke first. She did not look at him when she did it. She looked at the fire and said, "He died 2 winters before they took me. The child's father. He went out and did not come back." She said it the way you say, a thing that has been said so many times in your own head. It no longer has edges. Just the fact of it. He did not look at her either. The clan kept us. That is what a clan does. But there is a difference between kept and held, and I knew it. Before they took me, I was not a woman who stayed where she was kept. The child changed what I was willing to risk. And then they came in the night, and I did not know where the child was for a long time. She stopped. She did not look at him. He watched the fire. After a while, he said, "Her name was Clara." He did not explain who. She used to plant things every spring. Peppers mostly. Some other things I can't remember now. She bought seeds the spring before she died, and I never put them in the ground. He did not say anything else. There was not anything else that needed saying. The fire burned down some. The night was warm enough that neither of them moved to add wood. She was looking at the flat dark on the far side of the fire, and he was looking at the coals, and the quiet between them was not the same quiet it had been on the first night when he had left the lamp on the step and gone inside, and she had stayed out because there was nowhere else yet. It was not that quiet. The quality of it was different, not comfort, not anything close to ease. Just the first time, neither of them was managing how the other saw them. The watchfulness, the careful arrangement of how they sat. Neither of them doing that. They stayed until the fire was low. She went inside without saying anything. He sat for a while longer. When he came in, the cloth bag was on the table. He did not know if she had moved it or if he had left it there himself. He picked it up and held it for a moment, the string still tied in her knot. He thought about what the field looked like in April. He thought about the empty row along the south fence where she had always put the peppers. He set the bag back on the shelf. He did not put it in the back where he had been keeping it. He went to bed. He did not sleep right away. The part of him that had been braced for a long time went quiet. Not joy. Not the end of any of it. Just quiet. The way a muscle goes when it has been held too long, and finally you let it. In the morning she was already outside with the child, working along the south fence where they had been pulling posts. He watched them through the window for a moment before he went to start the stove. The child was handing her things and talking about something he could not hear through the glass. At some point the child looked up and saw him there and said something he also could not hear. He raised his hand. He started the stove. He did not say anything about the night before. It did not need to be said. Some weeks had passed. The fence line held. The field on the south side had been turned and planted, and whatever came up would be whatever came up. He was not certain about all of it. But the seeds were in the ground, and the ground had been watered, and that was more than he had done in 14 months. He saw the rider from the barn doorway, a single horse on the east road, moving at an unhurried pace, not one of the trader's horses. The build was different, and the rider sat with a kind of settled formality that said official business before the man got within speaking distance. He finished what he was doing and went to the house. She was at the table with the child. He said, "Someone coming up the road. Go to the back." She looked at him once. Not in fear. Just checking something in his face, finding whatever she found there. Then she stood and took the child's hand and went. He went to the porch. The afternoon was warm with no wind, the kind of day where sound carries a long way, and he could hear the horse on the road before it came through the gate. The man who rode up was not one of the three from the auction square. He was heavier, with a grey coat and the look of someone doing a job he had done many times. He tied the horse and came up the walk looking at the property, the way county men look at things they are noting. "You the rancher here?" "I am. County representative." He took a folded paper from inside his coat. "Got a complaint filed. Traders out of the market district. They claim a purchase made here some weeks back was under disputed terms." He looked at the paper, then at the rancher. An Orc female. They're saying her condition at time of sale made the contract unenforceable. The auctioneer set the price, the rancher said. He wrote it in the ledger. I paid it. I have the record. I'd like to see it. He went inside and came back with the paper from where he kept it. He handed it over. The county man read it without hurrying. They claim she was too ill at time of sale to have been offered legally, that the seller's agent should have pulled her from the block. He looked up. Their words, not mine. The agent declared a price and I paid it, the rancher said. That is the record. The county man folded the paper and handed it back. He looked at the fence, at the turned field, at the house. Any trouble out here? Anyone from that group come by? Not yet. I don't find much in this complaint, the county man said, but when something gets filed, I have to follow it, and someone else will come if it isn't put to rest. He picked up his reins. Keep that record somewhere dry. That's my advice. I'll do that, the rancher said. The county man mounted and rode back the way he came. The rancher watched the road until there was nothing moving on it. He went inside. She was in the doorway of the back room. The child was behind her. She did not ask. County official, he said. The sellers filed a complaint. He found nothing to act on. She looked at him. Then she nodded. The child was watching from behind her, not pretending to have been doing anything else. The rancher looked at the child. You all right? He said. Yes, the child said. Good. He put the record back where he kept it. They went back to work. He was awake before dawn when he heard them. Not one horse, several. He could tell from the way the sound spread across the dark, the uneven spacing, the weight of it, more than 3 animals moving together on the dry road. He got up and dressed, and took the transaction paper from the shelf where he kept it, and went to the window first. The first light was still an hour off. The road was dark, but he could make out the shapes at the gate. 5 riders. 4 he did not recognize. The 5th was the older seller from the auction square, the one who had stood with his arms folded and watched the wagon go. The rancher went to the back room. He knocked once and opened the door. She was already awake, sitting upright in the dark. Stay inside, he said. I'll handle this. He waited to see if she would agree. She looked at him. He went to the front door. He stepped out onto the porch. The morning was cool and still, the sky beginning to go grey along the bottom of the east. Rancher, the older man called from outside the gate. We're here to settle this. The gate's closed, the rancher said. Open it. Tell me what you want first. The older man held up a paper. Our lawyer says the sale was irregular. She was ill and the contract is void. We're here to take back what's ours. She's not yours, the rancher said. I paid the price your auctioneer set. I have the record. That record doesn't hold. I talked to the county representative, the rancher said. He reviewed the transaction and found it clean. We filed a complaint higher than him. His finding doesn't bind what comes after. Then what comes after will look the same as what he found, the rancher said. The transaction record is clean. The older seller looked past him at the house. The rancher turned. She was in the doorway. He had told her to stay inside. She had not. She stood in the open door with the dark of the room behind her, and she was tall and completely still, and she was looking at the older seller across the yard and the gate and the distance between them, with the same level eyes she had turned on the rancher the day he paid for her, when the auctioneer had said she was worthless and she had not moved. She said nothing. She did not need to. The child appeared at her hip. She put one hand on the child's shoulder without looking down. The older seller looked at her. He looked at the riders beside him. He looked back at the rancher. You don't understand what you've done, he said. His voice had changed, gone quieter. When her people find out where she is, You think they'll thank you for it. They won't. They'll come here, and you'll have nothing to show for any of this." The rancher let that sit for a moment. "Come back when you have papers that say otherwise," he said. "Papers from someone with the authority to issue them. Until then, the gate stays closed." The older seller looked at him for a long time, long enough that one of the other riders shifted in his saddle. "We'll be back," the older man said, "with more than papers." "That's your choice," the rancher said. The older seller pulled his reins. The riders turned and rode the way they had come, the sound of them spreading out and going flat in the grey morning dark. One of the younger men looked back once before the road bent and took them from sight. The rancher watched until there was nothing moving on the road. He went up the steps. She was still in the doorway. The child had not moved from her side. "They'll come back," he said. She looked at him. "I know," she said. That was all. They went inside. He heard them before he saw them. Many horses on the road, coming from the west, moving at a steady, unhurried pace that carried differently than the sellers had carried when they came before dawn. This sound was larger. More even. The kind of sound that comes when riders have no need to hurry because they are already enough. He went outside. She was already at the fence line, not working, not watching the road toward town, watching the road from the west, the direction the sound was coming from. She had been there for a while, long enough that the ground around her feet was scuffed from standing. She had known before he had heard them. He walked to the fence and stood beside her, and said nothing. They came into view from the low rise on the west road. Mounted riders, more than a dozen, more than he could count quickly. Orcs. They rode in a loose column without banners, without noise, without the performance of a rival. Some of them carried weapons at their saddles, but nothing was drawn. They simply came. They stopped at the gate in a line that stretched back along the road, each rider still, and they looked at the orc mother. She said one word. He did not know it, did not recognize the shape of it, but it was a name or a word of acknowledgement, and it was quiet and certain. The lead rider at the gate looked at her for a moment. Then he dipped his head. Once. That was all. They did not enter. They did not move from the road. They simply stood. The child appeared in the doorway of the house. The rancher looked back. "Stay there," he said. The child stayed. They waited. The sun came up fully. The field to the south caught the light. The rancher stood at the gate, and the orc mother stood beside him, and the clan behind them held the road, and no one said anything. The sellers came around the bend in the east road some time later. More riders than the last time. 10, maybe 12, with the older seller at the front on the same horse as before. They came at a pace that said they had resolved to force the question, and they came through the gap in the road, and then they stopped. The road ahead was not what they had planned for. The older seller looked at the mounted riders along the road. He looked at the rancher at the gate, at the orc mother beside him. He looked back at the riders, the line of them patient and still, not one weapon in hand, not one horse shifting its weight. He looked at the rancher again. The rancher looked back. He did not move toward anything. He did not say anything. He stood the way he had stood at the auction, when no one was bidding, and the auctioneer had declared her worthless, and he had raised his hand. Not courage displayed. Just the same flat, unhurried manner as every other moment. Something moved across the older seller's face. Not fear exactly, but the recognition that this was a different kind of ground than he had planned for. The count was visible on him. The men he had brought, the riders on the road, the woman at the gate with her level eyes. The number was not coming out in his favor. He pulled his reins. His riders followed without a word. They turned and rode the way they had come, and didn't look back, and the sound of them faded, and the road went quiet. Not one rider in the clan had moved. Not one hand had gone to anything. The rancher watched until the road was empty and still. The child came off the porch and ran to her mother. The orc mother put her arms around the child and held on. She did not look at the rancher. He did not look at her. That was a private thing, and it did not need a witness. He looked at the road for a long time. They camped on the flat ground east of the barn, outside the fence line, and they stayed for 4 days. He did not ask them to stay. He did not ask them to go. He went about his mornings the way he had before they came, and when he came out to feed the horses on the 2nd day, 2 of them were already at the south fence, working the broken section he had not gotten to yet. They did not look up when he came out. He fed the horses and went back inside. That was how it went. They worked, not on anything he asked them to. They found what needed doing, and they did it the way people do who have been working land their whole lives and know what work looks like when it has been waiting. On the 3rd morning, he found the barn roof section had been reboarded, the new wood still pale from cutting. He had not heard them at it. The day before they left, 4 of them were in the field turning the rows that had gone unworked since spring. He watched from the barn door for a while and did not go out. On the 4th day, a man from the camp came to the gate. Not the lead rider. An older man. He came alone and stood outside the gate and waited. The rancher came out. "The debt is acknowledged," the man said. He said it the way you say something that has been settled and does not require discussion. What was done for her was done. It will not be forgotten. "There is no debt," the rancher said. The man looked at him. Not dismissively. More the way you look at someone who has said what you expected them to say. "We will not argue about what to call it," the man said. "I don't need anything from it," the rancher said. "That is not how it works," the man said, and his voice was not unkind. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "All right," the rancher said. He was not sure what he was agreeing to. He was not sure the man needed him to know. The man went back to the camp. In the morning they were gone. She stood at the gate for a while and watched the road until they rounded the bend and the dust settled back down. He left her to it. Some things did not need company. The fence on the south and east sides was solid. He walked it after breakfast and tested every post and found nothing loose. The barn roof had been redone in 2 sections, the new boards fitted tight, and the old ones stacked beside the barn where he would find them. The rows in the field had been turned again, and the irrigation lines cleared. He had not asked for any of it. He stood at the edge of the field for a while and looked at what had been done. The ranch was quiet. It had been quiet before, after Clara. The quiet of a place with 1 person in it where there used to be 2. The kind that had weight to it, and you learned to move around it the way you move around furniture in the dark. This was not that. The child was inside making noise about something. The orc mother was on the back porch. The horses were in the paddock. Things were where they were supposed to be. Something harder to name than quiet. He left it at that. The crops came up. Not all of them, and not as many as the ground could have held if the planting had gone better or started earlier. But enough. The roof did not leak when the rains came in August. The fence on the south and east sides held through the wind that flattened a barn 2 miles down the road. It held. There was not a word for what the place had become. Not a family. That was a word that came with weight, and he was not sure it fit or that it needed to. Not hired help, which was wrong in a different way. Not a partnership of the kind you sign papers for. not anything that fit neatly into a category he already had words for. The word for what it was hadn't been invented yet, or it existed somewhere he didn't know. But something was there. Something that had been built one day at a time, without anyone deciding to build it. And it was standing now. And it had the feel of things that are going to keep standing. He stood at the edge of the pepper row one morning in late summer, and didn't move for a long time. Clara's seeds had been sitting in the cloth sack in the corner of the kitchen for 14 months before the orc mother asked him where her child was. He had not made the connection right then. He made it later, on a different morning, standing in a different place. He did not think about why. He thought about this. The seeds were in the ground, had been since April. They had come up green and ordinary, and not remarkable in any way, except that they were there, in the row along the south fence, where they had always been supposed to go. He had not planted them alone. He was not sure he could have. He did not know if that was the right feeling to have about it. After a while, he decided it did not matter. They were up. The ground had held them. The child had found a piece of rope and was using it to argue with the fence post nearest the gate. Conducting a negotiation, the rancher could not follow from where he stood. The post was not agreeing. The child tried different approaches. The orc mother was on the porch with a cup in her hand, watching. She did not look over at the rancher. He did not interrupt the rope argument. Some things were better left to settle themselves. He was still at the fence line when he saw the rider. Far down the west road, coming from the direction the clan had come from months ago, moving at an unhurried pace. A single horse. He watched it for a long moment. The road went further than his property, went on through to the next settlement and beyond, and people travelled it for reasons that had nothing to do with him. But he watched it. The orc mother had come off the porch and was standing at the corner of the house, looking at the same road. The child was still negotiating with the post. Nobody said anything. The rider did not turn, did not slow, kept moving, steady on the road, the way something moves when it is coming regardless. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving. He put his hands in his pockets and stood there for a while. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. Leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much.